Hi there, and welcome to the little apartment on the prairie. I was asked a really good question in the comments recently, and it was such a good question I wanted to do a whole video on the answer. So I was asked, how can you grow food, or can you grow food if you live in an apartment? And the answer is yes, you can grow some food if you live in an apartment, although you probably won't be able to have a huge garden like you would if you lived out in the country on a lot of land. But that's okay. A lot of us don't have the time for a real huge garden anyway, or the energy, or we're not physically able to do. You know, we can only physically do so much labor out in a garden. It's hard work in a garden and out in the heat and everything. So for lots of reasons, many of us can't have a big giant garden and grow all of our own vegetables. But that's okay. There are plenty of ways that you can grow some food if you live in an apartment, and I'm going to tell you some of the ways that I've done it before, and some other ways. Whiskers, would you sit down, please? And some other ways that I haven't tried or that haven't worked for me, but that might work for you. So one thing I did was I used to have sweet peppers. You know those little mini, like red, yellow, and orange peppers that you can usually buy them in a bag for like $3.99 or $4.99 for the bag. I planted some of those seeds once to see if they would grow, like out of some peppers that I ate. You know, I scooped out the seeds and put them in some dirt, and they grew. And I had some really good-sized pepper plants. I mean, they were big. Then I got Sassy when she was a little kitten, and she climbed those pepper plants like they were trees. I had two of them in my living room window, just sitting on top of, there's a bookcase right in front of my living room window. It's a low bookcase that comes up about equal with the windowsill. And I had two big pots because they needed big pots because they got big. They started out in a little pot, and I had to put them in a bigger pot. Sassy climbed them like they were trees and eventually destroyed them. But before that, for about 6 months, I was getting peppers off those things regularly, and like in the fall and in the middle of winter, because if it's warm in your house and you have a spot that gets a lot of sunshine, or you get some LED lights that will, provide light that your plants can grow, you can grow plants in a house, and you can grow them year round, at least many plants. So that's what I did. Then there was last summer, and I did two things last summer. The first thing I did was I tried growing potatoes in 5-gallon buckets that I could just put a couple buckets out back behind my apartment building. And I didn't ask my landlord. I'm pretty sure my landlord would say no, I couldn't grow a bunch of stuff in buckets behind my building. But I only had like 3 or 4 buckets back there, and it wasn't that noticeable, and nobody cared. So, your landlord might be okay with you putting out a couple buckets. Maybe they're okay with you having a tomato plant, or maybe you can put several buckets out. It's going to depend on where you live and your landlord, but that's one option. So I grew some potatoes out there, and my potatoes did not do very well. I'll put a link. I think I did a video about it. I'll put a link about it. But in the video that I did about growing potatoes in buckets, I put a link to some videos that I watched about how to grow potatoes in buckets. And apparently you can grow a lot of potatoes in some 5-gallon buckets. And I talked in those videos like why I didn't think mine worked. I think I watered them too much, or I didn't have enough holes in the bottom of the bucket, so they got too wet in the bottom. So, one of the things about gardening is that there's like a lot to learn. And if you haven't done it before, or you're doing it in a new way, you may have to learn some things. You may make some mistakes. Some things may not work out so well at first. So the other thing I did last year is I was looking for somebody that had land that would let me put a garden in on their property in exchange for giving them some free produce. And I posted in a couple local Facebook groups online just asking, just to see if anybody would say yes. And I ended up finding someone who wanted to have a garden herself, and she'd gardened before, so she knew a lot more about it than I did. And she had the land where she could do it, but she didn't have the time or wasn't physically able to do all the work herself. So she was happy to have someone who could put in a lot of work and also who could share the expense of buying the seeds and the plants and stuff. So I had a garden with her. And for various reasons, I decided to do something different this year, but that worked. And that was someone that I did not know. I'd never met her before until I posted an ad on Facebook about what I was looking for. So, you could find someone that was willing to do something like that, either on local Facebook groups, or maybe you could hang up a flyer at your local library, or hear people put flyers about all kinds of things on a bulletin board at the post office. Or maybe you can just ask around. Maybe you can ask your neighbors, whether you know them or not. Some people are going to tell you no, and they might look at you like you're crazy, but somebody might say sure. This year, one of the things I wanted was to do it closer to where I live, because that was a little bit of a drive last summer to get to her house. And so this year I had a former neighbor. She used to live in my apartment complex, but she had moved, and we were kind of friends. I babysat for her kids before and stuff. And so her landlord didn't want her to tear up the yard to put in a garden. But I asked her if I could just put some 5-gallon buckets with vegetables growing in them in her backyard, and she said sure, as many as I wanted. And she's like a little under a mile away from me, so it worked out to be closer. Now, I'm not getting as much food out of those buckets as I had hoped I would. I have gotten some, but I had hoped to do a lot better. So I don't know yet what I'm going to do next year, but those are things that have worked. To, ask somebody you know. And if you can't put in a garden where they are, maybe they'll let you put buckets where they are if you can't put buckets where you live because you live in an apartment. Or if you live in a house that you rent and you can't tear up the lawn to put in a garden, maybe you can garden in buckets. I've known people who've been really successful gardening in buckets. Some other options are, depending on where you live, there may be a community garden that you would pay a small amount of money for a plot in. I think they have something like that in Lincoln, but that's like an hour away from me, so that's not, that's not feasible to drive that far as often as you need to go there. But maybe where you live, there's something closer to you. Whiskers, lay down, little girl. So, if you have a balcony or a patio at your apartment, you could grow some things in pots or buckets on your balcony or your patio. You can also grow herbs in your window. I've done that before, and you can grow them in small pots. You can grow sprouts in a jar on your kitchen counter, and I've done that before, and you can look up information online about how to do that. You can also get kits that will grow mushrooms that would fit on your kitchen counter. So there are lots of ways that you can still grow some food, even if you don't have a lot of room. And even if you're in an apartment, even if you rent, even if you can't dig up you don't have ground you can dig up to put in a garden. There are a lot of options. And what I would encourage people to do is to just start and grow something, anything. It's, food prices are going up, so it's going to help. And even if you're just growing some herbs, so you're kind of adding some flavor and a little nutrition to your food, but you're not getting a lot of calories out of what you're growing for yourself, that can still help. I mean, those herbs could go a long way if you're, eating a lot of rice and beans or, cheap food like that. And just grow something. Try it, see how it works. And if it doesn't work out well, try something else. You'll learn stuff as you do it. Let me know if you're going to try growing stuff in an apartment. Let me know if you've grown stuff in an apartment in some other way besides what I mentioned. Not only because I'd like to know, but because I think there are other people that watch this channel that would benefit from reading your comments if you've been able to grow something in an apartment that you rent or in a place without a lot of space. I hope everybody's having a great day, and I will see you soon.